you're in for a real treat with our next two speakers talking about the playbook, which you heard a little bit about this morning in the keynote. So we have Dom Price and Georgie Bottomley. Dom has actually taken 24 flights since US Summit in October, so he's been a busy bee. And fun fact about Georgie, she always wears dresses. She's wearing a really beautiful flamingo one today. She will model for you, and sparkly gold shoes. So two great people for you. If we have time for Q&A, keep track of your questions, and we'll do that at the end. You'll also be able to submit feedback in the app. But without further ado, please welcome Dom Price.
Thank you. You keep that. How's everyone feeling this afternoon? There's one person awake in the room. This is going to be fun. We're going to take you through a little bit of an experience in the next 40 minutes. There'll be a few things that'll be different from this experience and a lot of the other talks you'll see at conferences like this. It's probably the least amount of product references you're going to get. I'm not going to teach you how to be a great Jira administrator. This is purely around teams and the human aspect of how you get people to work together. If you are hoping to learn about Confluent Spaces, you're in the wrong room. Feel free to leave or stick around and enjoy it anyway. So the Team Playbook, you're going to hear from me and from Georgie. What I'm going to talk to you about first is why you should give a bleep. Why are we even here? Why we even made this a topic? Why is this thing we're even talking about? Georgie's then going to take you through some stories from the trenches. So I'll take you through the background, the context, some of the theory, some of the things that we've practiced. And then Georgie's going to take you through some stories of how teams have actually applied this and what we've learned along the way. We want to share our lessons with you so that you can learn from them and apply them yourself. And then at the end, we're going to have some action for you because ultimately you're here to learn something to do that you can try, and we want you to have some takeaways. You ready to have some fun? Both of you are ready. Both of you are really in the zone. This is the liveliest audience I could get on a Tuesday afternoon. So bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is the kryptonite to productivity. That's actually a quote by Gary Hamel. He's a seasoned author, best-selling author, currently a guest lecturer at the London School of Economics. And when I look at this quote, I think about a current statistic. If you look at the year 2000 and the Fortune 500, 50% of the organizations that were on that list aren't on that list today. 50% of the organizations that in the year 2000 were successful enough to be on the Fortune 500 are no longer there. They were probably optimized organizations or very efficient organizations, potentially customers or companies like Borders. Borders who did a really good job of competing with every other bookstore, and they were the best bookstore. The problem was the Kindle and the iPad. People stopped buying books and Borders no longer exist. At best, they're probably coffee shops. So what we're going to talk to you today is how you get your teams to be more relevant, how you get your teams to be adaptable, to be nimble, to be agile. I am not going to teach you the principles and the methodical nature of agile. This is a homage to agile, design thinking, lean, a whole lot of principles that we've glued together. So who's this guy? Prize for any guesses? Anyone can read the NASA badge on the Armstrong? Anyone? No. Anyone follow the space travel? No. So this is Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong's really important to this story because we have a habit of celebrating the achievements of individuals. We put individuals on pedestals, and yet Neil Armstrong didn't land on the moon. NASA did. And then we think about people like this in the tech space, a revered gentleman years after he passed away. Most of the stories written about Apple are actually written about Steve Jobs. But if you think about what Apple has achieved, it was a family of people, it was a team of people that achieved that. And yet we have this habit of putting individuals on pedestals. I firmly believe the greatest human achievements that you can all think of and that I think of every day are achieved by teams. I imagine in your organizations, that's the same thing. So why is this so hard? Why is teamwork so difficult? We've been on this planet for a good while, depending on what religion you sign up for, depends on how long you think we've been here for, but let's just agree we've been here for a while. So why is it difficult? So one of the reasons is scaling. The world around us is changing at an epic rate. We've almost got this perfect storm. The technology refresh cycle, faster than it's ever been before. Customers have more information than they've ever had before. In fact, a lot of customers will have more information about you than you have. Those customers also tend to have really low switching costs. So this nature of apathy versus loyalty. You've got competitors that are coming from everywhere, often places where you least expect it. And they will come and they will eat your lunch. They will take your business away from you. When you add the concept of time, who here is time poor? Time poor, anyone time poor? Lots of time poor people. So time poor people are really good. Time poor people are good because time is one of the few things that as humans we all get the same amount of. We all get 24 hours a day. What's hard in business and in teams is prioritizing the things you want to do and the things you don't want to do. We end up spreading ourselves really thinly and trying to do bits of everything, and that's when we genuinely feel time poor because we're not having an impact. Then there's this idea as a leader, and I firmly believe that whatever role you're in, we're all leaders. We're leading the people that we're trying to influence. Whether they be the people that report to us or not, it doesn't matter. It's often people outside of our reporting lines, outside of our traditional organization chart, who are the people we're trying to influence. And for those people, we want to be a multiplier. We want to give them some wisdom, some vision, some direction that enables them to go and do great work themselves. As a leader, you can't be constrained by the 8 hours of work you have available. You're expected to be a multiplier. And then there's a killer to things like productivity and things like innovation, which is perfection. This desire that high-performing individuals often have to be the perfect version of themselves. Perfection's a killer to innovation because it doesn't allow you to fail along the way. It doesn't allow you to acknowledge that progress is often way more important than perfection. Progress in delivering value to your customers and engaging your stakeholders is way more valuable than getting to the end, because the end might never be there. So the reason this is a passionate topic for me is we did some research recently and found that 90% of organizations say that the problems they're trying to solve are so complex they have to have teams. Cognitively diverse teams. Teams that think different. Teams that actually have this positive tension and friction. Discussion, debate, collaboration. So that's the really good news. 90% of companies solving complex problems need teams. Here's the slightly less good news. 75% of cross-functional teams say they're dysfunctional. So we're like, oh, yay, we have to work in teams. Ooh, teams are really hard. And teams are hard. It's people of different backgrounds, different experience, different functions. It's design working with QA, working with engineering, working with product management. It's HR working with legal. We all have these different backgrounds. We bring our own functional expertise to the table. And that can be difficult. We actually did a survey ourselves recently of a whole lot of people. And what we found fascinating was that over half of our respondents said they identified more with their team. They were motivated by their team. They felt a connection to their team way more than to the organization they worked for. It didn't surprise many people in teams. It surprised a lot of CEOs who were like, no, I've written this amazing company strategy and everyone signs up to it. And I'm like, yeah, actually, your teams care more about the tribe around them, the environment in which they work, whether that be a team they physically work with in co-location or a distributed team that they collaborate with across borders. The reason this is becoming more important right now is this perfect storm that we're in is giving us things like artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics. And we're seeing mass changes in roles, mass changes in functions and jobs around the world. I believe the changes we're going to go through in the next 12, 15, 20 years, maybe even 3 years, are going to be unprecedented for what we've seen before. Now, the interesting thing here is when we actually look at the changes to roles, whilst there's this natural intrinsic fear that change is bad and we're all going to lose our jobs and everything's going to be terrible, or you can look at the positive news that says we'll be working 4-hour weeks and have all this social time with our family to have great meaningful connections. Either way, if you look at history, in the last 144 years, technology's created more roles than it's taken away. The challenge we have as teammates, as leaders, as people that are driving change, is in those 144 years, there was mass displacement of roles. So we've had a significant change in the nature of roles that people are doing. I imagine for most of you, the role you're doing today may not have existed 10 or 15 years ago. So it's bestowed upon us to try and work out what are those roles of the future and how do we help teams change the way they work. So let's come back onto dysfunction. When we drill down with team members around why they struggle in teams, 78% of people admitted they don't trust their teammates. Trust, a fundamental, psychological trust of how we get on with each other. So we did the right thing and we asked them why. Like, why don't you trust each other? What are the 2 reasons? And the 2 things that came back were communication and accountability. Now, this threw me a little bit because I think these are really good human skills that we have that robots and artificial intelligence and automation don't. These are things that as humans we should be kind of pretty cool at and pretty good at that make us differentiate ourselves in the way we work from robots and not make us compete with them. And yet 78% of people we talk to are struggling to trust their teammates. So we dove into it a little bit and did some research. And what we found is that as teams try and become more relevant, as they try and become agile, they have this desire to be adaptable and nimble, they are carrying baggage. And the baggage they're carrying is probably from the Industrial Revolution, a time when factories ruled, where the workforce was illiterate, where it was a very male-dominated, white male workers, the slide Scott had before in the keynote. People at machines doing handwork. If you look at today's workforce and workplace, it isn't like that. It's not an illiterate workforce, it's a very highly educated workforce. It's not white men, it's a diverse workforce. It's cognitively diverse, it's racial and gender diverse. It's spread across geographies. It's not people working with their hands, it's a lot of people working with their heads and their hearts. And yet we've got this legacy of these factories. And I don't mean literal factories. I mean how you lead your teams every single day. Whether it be control or fear or anything that makes you think about optimizing your world to be efficient. Efficient is fine and it has a time and a place. But if you're efficient, you're going to build the best Borders bookstore America will never see. Because everyone else is reading Kindles and iPads. For you to manage and lead and inspire your teams, what we need to be thinking about is effectiveness. How can we stay relevant? How can we be adaptable? And we wanted to do that at Atlassian. So around 3 years ago, we sat there and looked at, as we scaled, we never wanted to be famous for being a certain size, for being so many thousand employees. We always wanted to be excited and energized by how we work. And so we went on a mission to stay relevant and effective as we scaled across the globe. The way we did that was, first of all, a realization and a confirmation. Tools alone are not the answer. A fool with a tool is still a fool. You can give the most stupid person the best products in the world, and you're not going to get a wonderful result. It might be entertaining, but you're not going to get a great outcome from them. And so what we did was we said, how do our products work in harmony with the practices, the guardrails of how teams and people integrate and work together? What we landed on originally was a project team health monitor. We very quickly looked at a whole of Atlassian teams and said, what does a healthy team look like? And what does a sick team look like? And we did a compare and contrast. And we landed on these 8 attributes. Now, if I worked or was employed by Stanford, I'd then go and do extensive research for the next 15 years, and I would come back with a really amazing proof paper and thesis on how this all worked. But we didn't do that because we're Atlassian. So I grabbed a Bitbucket team in Sydney, and we tried this out. And it worked. And we tried it with another team, and we evolved it. And over a period of time, we found out that not every team was a project team. Actually, we identified 2 other team types. These are team personas. So we discovered a couple of things. First of all, leadership teams, service teams, and project teams are intrinsically linked. If a leadership team has really poor shared understanding of why they're doing what they're doing, the project teams around them are probably going to struggle. Service teams that are trying to deliver a service to a customer that doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing is likely going to struggle to improve that service because they have no engagement and communication on why they're providing that service. The other thing we realized was that as an individual, and I would challenge each of you to think about this, you are a member of several teams. As an individual, you are likely going to have the same role, the same title, for let's say the next 2 years. But your responsibilities on every single project or service team or leadership team that you're in is different. And it's imperative for you to understand the context switching of that so that you can bring your best self to that team and you can bring your best self to work every day. I've had the fortune of running over 600 sessions both within Atlassian and doing health monitors with our teams across the globe and also with customers. A host of Atlassian customers in the US, Australia, and the next 2 weeks across Europe. And we've seen some amazing themes, we've seen some amazing improvement in the Atlassian teams of how we work and how we get shit done. Underlying this is the Atlassian Playbook. And in October last year, we decided that we were going to open source and launch the playbook for the public to consume, for all of you to consume. We didn't want to keep this secret sauce to ourselves. We've been running with this for around 18 months. We were confident that it worked, and we wanted to share it with you. So that URL that you see there, Atlassian.com/Team Playbook, has the 3 health monitors, how you assess a team and how they're working. Think of it like a fitness instructor putting your team through a set of drills to work out how fit they are. It also includes 26 plays. The plays are exercises that you get your team to do to improve. Simple. You do a fitness test and you realize that you're not good at cardio, you go and do a whole lot of exercise. This has not been built by a thought leadership team, by an internal team. We've not got a whole lot of content writers building this. This is built and used by Atlassian teams every single day. In fact, the Atlassian teams and every Atlassian member that you'll meet here in the next few days uses the exact same version that exists for the public. A very simple model of diagnosing how you work together as a team, nothing to do with products, how you interact and engage as a team, and then plays, which are exercises that we have tried that work for us, that enable us to navigate out of those areas. Now, I can talk for about 4 days through the 600 health monitors I've run, how I've run them, and how much fun they are, but instead of doing that, I'm going to introduce Georgie. What Georgie's going to do is take you through stories from the trenches of how actual teams have run this, the things they've found, and the things we've learned along the way, so you can learn from what we've learned. Georgie.
So as Dom was mentioning, we've seen that there's some really common problems out there with our customers. And these are the 3 main problem areas that we see coming up time and time again: communication breakdown, external factors, and conflicting priorities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 3 different case studies of how teams who have faced these challenges have used the playbook and were able to overcome them. So our first case study today is Bitbucket pipelines. So has anyone in the room had a chance to play with Bitbucket pipelines at all? Fantastic. Yeah, a couple of you. Fantastic. That's really lovely. So as you probably know, Bitbucket Pipelines released their MVP towards the end of last year. And this was absolutely fantastic for the team. But as you know, it takes an awful lot of guts and determination to get an MVP out of the door. There was a lot of hard work that had gone into it. And when the MVP was launched, the team kind of took a bit of a step back and they said, okay, now we've learned what we've learned. Was our previous roadmap the right thing to do? We've got an awful lot of things that we could potentially tackle next. What's the right feature for us? What's the most important feature for us to tackle? And there were lots of different opinions within the team as to how we could approach this. So as Don mentioned, we did a series of plays to get this direction and prioritization for the team together. So the first play that we looked at was the experience canvas. So the experience canvas is a way for you to detail the value that your product brings to your customers. You're able to detail why people use it, the problems that it's solving, your USP. And what was really lovely here was it actually crystallized for the team what the core value of the product was. So this meant that they redefined the USP and they could really understand what that value was. All those other projects, all those other features that they thought might be interesting, if they weren't central to the USP, dropped off the list. We also had a look at an empathy map. So this is a little bit like creating customer personas. This is a way for you to map your customer needs, but most importantly, you map them within your customer's context. So you understand kind of full 360, if you like, exactly what's going on for your customer. So the outcome here was it really brought the team together in terms of their empathy of who they were building for and why they were building. It meant that they understood what was most important for the customers, and it kept the team honest. As you know, at Atlassian, we care an awful lot about you, our customers, and what we can be doing to make your lives better. Concreting that as a team meant we could really focus in terms of the roadmap. And then finally, we did 6-up sketching. So as Dom mentioned, the playbook is constantly evolving. This is a play that you actually won't currently find online. We've been playing with it internally, and that's it'll be going up on the playbook in a couple of weeks. It's a solution-generating play, and I absolutely love this. You fold a piece of paper into 6 squares, and you quickly sketch out different solutions for your problem. And this is a really lovely way for a team to go very broad, looking at all of the different potential solutions that they can come up with. And then the outcome of this, by voting on these different solutions, we're able to come up with this prioritized list of solutions, what's key for our customers. So the outcome for the Bitbucket Pipelines team was they were really able to come together. Before, they were unsure about their strategic initiative. They had a newly launched product, but they weren't too sure what to do next. After this, they were able to really unify on their problem. They had a common language, and they set the direction for the team going forward. So we turned the team around from being unclear to crystal clear. So our second case study today is with Confluence. So was anyone around at Summit 2014? I have to admit, oh my goodness. So this is wonderful. This is something of myth and legend for me, I'm afraid. So Summit 2014 is when we announced conference collaborative editing. And for the people who were there who know, it absolutely blew the Summit attendees away. Everyone was so excited about this. But it's something that we've actually only just been able to launch. So it's taken us 4 years to deliver. In that time, we've had 4 different PMs on the team, 3 different designers, and 2 different dev managers. So as you can imagine, with a lot of change in the team, there's been a certain amount of lack of clarity. So the story or the case study I'm going to walk you through now is from Matt Lawrence, who's our principal product manager on that team. And I'm sure you're going to find this fascinating. So Matt was new to the team probably about 18 months ago now, and he found that he was coming into a team that was pretty dysfunctional. The internal stakeholders were really confused as to why this project was taking so long, and the team itself had a really low morale. They constantly felt like they weren't meeting people's expectations and the project was taking too long. So one of the first things that Matt did was he ran a health monitor. Now, speaking to Matt about this, he'd say that actually he would probably have found out these problems anyway, just by working with the team and the stakeholders. But what the health monitor allowed him to do was very quickly and very clearly identify the biggest problems within the team. So they had no clear owner. As you can imagine, with such a high turnover, there was a lot of loss of knowledge and this lack of morale within the team. They didn't know the stakeholders' expectations, so this meant there were lots of shifting priorities. They were constantly kind of chasing different tails. And finally, they didn't have that shared understanding, so it meant nobody really knew what they were meant to deliver. So therefore, it was really hard to set timelines and goals around something that was so unclear. So the team then went around running a series of plays to try and get themselves back on track. The first play that they did was a demo trust. So a demo trust is a regular meeting for your stakeholders and also the people working within the team to discuss the project. And this had an incredible outcome for the team. They found that they were very quickly able to build a relationship between the external stakeholders and the internal team members. The stakeholders started to understand the dependencies that they had within the team, and the team members started to understand the stakeholder expectations. From that, they could map the timelines, they could start to understand how the project should be shaping. They also ran DAISY. So DAISY is a decision-making framework. We actually have a template for this on Confluence. So this is on a single page. You can track the decisions and how a project is progressing. So again, this was super useful. DAISY brought the team together on one page, quite literally in Confluence, all on the same page. And they were able to start to track that accountability and clarity as to how the project was progressing. The stakeholders started to understand the progress and the decisions that the team were making. I think what was also really powerful here is the comments that you have on Confluence. So what this meant was you didn't need endless status meetings. As a stakeholder, you could look at a page and comment on it. As a team member, you could go on the page and comment on it. It really cut down that kind of face-to-face time that was needed. And then the final play is a pre-mortem. So a pre-mortem is just like a post-mortem. You just run it before a project has finished. And this was really interesting for the team. So the outcome here actually was they realized that there were some things that they needed to get over the finishing line that they'd forgotten about. So an example of this is analytics. They realized that they didn't have in-product analytics for the current editing functionality, and they needed to add that as well as the analytics for once collab editing had gone live. So they could baseline the current experience and then measure how much of an improvement they'd made to the product. So having this pre-mortem allowed them to realize that and get it into the project before it was too late. What was also really nice about this pre-mortem was, as I mentioned, the team had quite a low morale. This was a great opportunity for them to come together and acknowledge the amount of work that they had done. So this was a really lovely way to celebrate the fact that they got to where they did in the project. So the outcome, from a team that was really, really struggling to meet these stakeholder expectations and was kind of working on a project that felt like it was never ending, Colab editing has been shipped, both in cloud and server. I hope most of you have had a chance to have a play with it yourselves. This was a huge win for a team. This was a huge win, obviously, at Atlassian as well, but most importantly for us, this is a huge win for you, our customers. It's something you've been asking for quite a while. As you can see to the side of me, this is the Confluence Colab editing team. They look very smiley. The project certainly turned out really well for them. And a massive thank you, as I said, to Matt Lawrence, the gentleman in the check shirt who shared this story with me so I could relay it to you today. So the final case study I'd like to talk to you about is actually external. So this is an external company to Atlassian. And I really hope that this shows you that anyone can use the playbook. You don't need to be an Atlassian to do this. So because this is an external company, I'm not able to use any specifics. In fact, this image is stolen from the internet. This is in no way representative of the team that I am talking about today. But hopefully it gives us a sense of what's going on. So this external company had two teams that were both working on a project. And these two teams were in very different locations, not just in terms of time zone, but also in terms of culture. And they were struggling to work together. When the work had initially been kicked off, it was two separate streams. So the goal was that these two teams didn't need to work together. But as the project continued and the dependencies became more obvious, they actually realized that there was a lot going on between these two teams. And it seemed really, really complex. Everyone was a little bit worried, to be honest with you. So as Dom mentioned, he goes into external companies and has run some health monitors with them. So Dom actually went into this company and ran a health monitor. And when Dom went in, the company were really thinking that in order to solve these problems, they needed to co-locate everyone. They needed to pull together everyone in the same room. But this was really challenging because this wasn't actually logistically possible. There were lots of people in very different places. The time and the cost to do that just wasn't feasible. So instead, they were like, okay, co-location isn't going to happen. I tell you what, we'll build it ourselves. We'll ignore the other team. We won't talk to them. We'll do what we call the ostrich approach, where we just bury our head in the sand and we hope all those horrible problems go away. Funnily enough, that didn't work either. So they were really struggling with these dependencies between the two teams, the communication, and they had a real lack of shared understanding. This is what the health monitor showed us. So we ran a few plays to, again, get this team back on track. So the first play that we ran was a project poster. So a project poster is a one-pager that details what you're doing, but most importantly, it details why you're doing it. So we did this with the two teams separately, and this actually was really interesting. So what we found was that both of the teams thought that we were doing the same thing, but they thought we were doing it because of very different reasons. So they had very different problems, and they had a very different approach. And we found that actually this was probably the main cause of the friction between the two teams. They were coming from two very different places. And this was a big penny drop moment, I'd have to say, in this process. So the outcome was that the team was a lot more confident. They had much more clarity as to why they were doing something, and it started to really pull these two teams together. The next play that the teams ran was an end-to-end demo. So an end-to-end demo kind of does what it says on the tin, to be honest with you. It's a demo that you run of your ideal solution. This could be something on a whiteboard, cardboard, PowerPoint, however you want to do it. It's not the medium, it's actually showing what it is that you're aiming for. And when we ran the end-to-end demo, we actually did this with both teams together. And I think this is what was the linchpin in this. The two teams having to work together realized that they couldn't actually create this on their own. They'd have to work together to make the project work. And it kickstarted a whole new way of them working. And then the final play that we ran was roles and responsibilities. So Dom spoke about this a little bit earlier on. Roles quite often is your job title, but responsibilities can change over the course of a project. And we wanted to understand who was doing what. So with roles and responsibilities, it's a document that you fill out, and it's what you think you do and what you think you're not doing. And this, again, is super interesting. So we found that There were certain people who all thought they were doing the same thing or looking after the same area, and there were other areas where no one was looking after them at all. So it meant in some places people were treading on each other's toes, and then there were just other kind of blind spots that the team was having. So documenting this, pulling this together, having clearly defined roles and responsibilities meant that the team started to have a way that they could communicate to each other. They knew who they should go to for what. This meant that they didn't need any big changes. So this wasn't changing anyone's job title. This was just changing their day-to-day tasks, their responsibilities within the project. So, the outcome. As you can see from this wonderful stock image behind me, the team were really happy. So, as we mentioned before, the project was really struggling. 2 different teams, 2 different locations, not necessarily on the same page. But from running the health monitor and running these plays, we were really able to turn around not only the team, but also the project. The company were absolutely blown away by how quickly they were able to make changes and get things back on track. So, as I said, I really hope that this shows that anybody can use a playbook. You don't need to be Dom in a slightly dodgy cape. You certainly don't need to be an Atlassian. Anyone can use the playbook to allow you to turn things around. So, this takes me on to our final section, which is very much saying that this is all on you. As Dom mentioned, we find this hugely exciting. I don't think we'd be up here kind of prancing around if we didn't. All of the information and more than we've spoken about today is all up on the website. Please feel free to take as many pictures of this slide as you would like. It's all self-service. You've got all of the diagnostic tools on there. You've got the health monitors. Every single play that I've talked about and more are on there. And there's a really lovely way for you to match them. If you do have any questions, we've got a booth upstairs, so please feel free to pop round. We can do a health monitor with you over the next couple of days about your team, or even just answer any questions. Does everyone have a picture? I don't want to move on before. This is it, guys. This is basically the whole talk on one slide, so I don't want to gloss over this too much. Lovely. So that takes us on to takeaways. I'm going to hand back to you, Dom.
Cool. Thank you. So in summary here, this is something that we've... Thank you, Georgie. Go on, round of applause for Georgie. Go on, Lewis.
Thank you.
You deserve it. When we originally started working this way, we were really happy with the freedom that it gave us. It gave us freedom to keep our teams autonomous, keep our teams empowered and owning their own destiny and accountable for their destiny. And it's enabled us to keep our teams really small. So whilst, Scott mentioned before, we're over 2,000 people now. If you look at our project tracking, we've actually got about 320 teams. So that picture of the collab editing team, the kind of 8 or 9 people you saw there, that's a standard size for an Atlassian team. Those smaller teams stay more nimble and agile, but they need that freedom to do that. And the playbook, the health monitors, and the plays have enabled them to do that. When I think about new ways of working, there's a fundamental thing in there that we need to accept, which is often quite hard, and almost harder if you are more experienced or a veteran of your trade, which is unlearning. How can you take the practices that may have worked last year or the year before or the month before and unlearn them because they're not going to work in the future? That takes time, it takes freedom, it takes a retrospective and introspection to understand how you're going to evolve your leadership style, how you're going to have a positive impact on your team, and how your team is going to have a positive impact on your organization so your organization stays relevant. I assume none of you want to be part of the organizations that are no longer part of the Fortune 500 or the equivalent in Europe or around the world. You want to be working for organizations that do have impact and teams where you're celebrating your success, not worrying about whether you're relevant anymore. So unlearning and finding ways of then learning new ways of working, really important. Second one is evolving practices. The playbook is not a static document. One of the reasons we decided to publish was it put a forcing function and pressure on us to continually update and evolve it. As our organization changes, our practices change. So an awareness of that technology refresh cycle, the different skills that we're hiring for, different competition, different customer needs. For evolving practices to work, you have to get out of thinking a product fixes everything, and you have to get out of the insular world that is your organization and understand your external stakeholders and your customers and your competitors. It's having one eye outside the organization and on the future, not just on optimizing your world and creating your own language. And the last one is then finding that balance and congruence. Making sure that you have a balanced message and balanced way of working around the people that you hire, the practices that you follow, and the tools that you use. And I firmly believe that when you combine those things and you get them to work in harmony, you really can unleash the potential of every team and do some wonderful things.
So in conclusion, the Team Playbook is a really quick way to understand what problems are happening in your teams. And it gives you a framework to quickly solve those. So I hope you've realized that anyone can use the playbook. You don't need to be an Atlassian. You don't need to be in t-shirt and jeans. Anyone has the ability to use this tool. So there's absolutely nothing stopping you. Dom and I really urge you to go and try the playbook when you're back at work. Thank you.
If you do have any trepidation or fear in trying something like the playbook, as Georgie mentioned before, we have got the playbook booth on the expo floor. So there's 2 other Atlassians who've done a selection of health monitors and plays with our teams. Go to them with a problem. Don't go to them with theory. Go to them with a thing that one of your teams is struggling and try and get them to solve that for you and work through the methodical way. That's the best way of learning.